Hello and welcome to the Spring 2020 semester. You should be able to find the information for your course on Canvas. Just kind of take a look around and get started. I'm going to switch this here. And before our semester begins, I wanted to talk a little bit about having questions because this is a really common thing in CIS classes and of course in any class. But in CIS classes, sometimes we work with many different types of technologies in the same class, and there can be many things to keep track of all at once. So we can end up with some questions, and sometimes we can even feel like they were a dumb question. So is that old saying true that there's no such thing as a dumb question? Let's think about it. When we're programming, we have lots of questions. Sometimes we're just missing information. Sometimes we weren't given some information that we need. It could just be missing. We're working in a technological field that could be state of the art. Information might be hard to find. Maybe we're working on a new concept that we just plain can't understand. We can't wrap our mind around it. Other people are understanding it, but we're not. That can happen. That can cause us some questions. It could be that we're doing everything right and what we're working on just won't work. Here's an example. Here's my little Python program that's not being very helpful in its explanation, is it? So sometimes it can be hard to figure out what's wrong. So what do? How do we proceed? It can be really overwhelming. So let's step back and use a standard problem-solving strategy to help identify exactly what the question is. Before we can ask a question, let's figure out exactly what it is. So first, we're going to clarify the problem, then identify some key elements, do some visualizing, consider examples, and then acquire knowledge. So what do I mean by clarifying the problem? Well, it's a lot easier to solve a specific problem than a vague one. So let's identify the source of the problem. Is this a Canvas issue? Is this a code syntax issue? Then, once we've identified the source of the problem, we can identify the location. Does this occur only on my home computer or only on campus when I'm using Wi-Fi? Is there something there that I could find? Now, sometimes when we're clarifying the problem, we can, at this point, look some things up. Maybe we've got a Canvas error message or something that we could look up to see if we can find out any further information to clarify things. Next, we want to identify the key elements. Our problems, our questions can be hidden by useless information, and those are the things that can make us feel like they're dumb questions. They can distract us and waste our time. We know our source. Is it Canvas? Was it our code? We figured that out in our last step. So now we can add in some details, like I'm trying to take the Unit 1 exam in Canvas, and I'm receiving this error. Or my Python code is giving a syntax error when I try to run it in idle. Notice how this information will be helpful when you ask your question. Now, it's important to visualize. You know how they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. That's true even with code, and sometimes it can be hard to get a picture. So use what's available. If you're working with something that allows it, take a screenshot. Send a copy of your source code. Don't send a screenshot of source code because that's real limiting, and that can be not as much of a visual help as the actual source code file. These things would work well for our examples. But what about other questions like, how does looping work? I don't really understand it. Or other concepts in programming. Well, visualizing it will help. You could sit back and close your eyes and visualize the loop. Think of doing something a certain number of times. How would you keep track of how many times you've done it? How would you keep track of how many times you had left? Those kinds of things are important in developing an understanding of the concepts that you might be working with in your programming classes. And then it's helpful to consider examples. Is this reacting the way you would expect? Look at some code that you've already written as an example, or look at examples in your text. Be sure to download any sample code that's available to you from your textbook publisher. As you create code, keep those examples because you'll want to refer back to them for examples to. Looking at other examples of if statements, you would notice that my Python code was simply missing a semicolon, and that was causing the syntax error. So considering other examples could help me solve that problem. Now, after doing all of these things, ready to try to acquire that knowledge or get that question answered. So some other things that we can do, we know specifically what kind of information we're looking for. We might be able to use the index in the back of the textbook, the table of contents at the beginning. These items are available, or we could search through the textbook if it's an online book. We could ask the question in Discord, or we could email our instructor. We're going to do some searching online, Googling our error message to see if we can find more information. So we're ready to get that answer. So hopefully all of these things have helped us to really formulate our question. We can also get some more specific information on how to form a good question from Stack Overflow. And Stack Overflow, you might be aware, is a website that often offers good technical tips on programming and different things, and experts post information on Stack Overflow. They have some great information on how to form a good question. And these things, again, will really help you clarify your thoughts and get things lined out so that you can identify exactly what your question is and what your issue is. And as they say at the bottom, oftentimes you may find that you've already solved or answered your own question or solved your own problem by the time you followed all of these steps. So, in answer, there is no dumb question. The question is always important. So what's important is how you formulate it and using the information you have at your disposal to get the best possible answer. So that's it. Our word for the semester is the question is important, and I want you to have a great semester. Thanks.